Today in our devotional, we're going to discuss something that's a skill that unfortunately most of us, if not all of us, are guilty of many times in our lives, in every relationship, but especially in marriage. You notice that the topic is say what you mean, which was a little nicer way than talking about what we really are addressing today, which is the idea of being passive aggressive. This may be a term that you've heard many times in your life. Maybe your spouse says it to you on a daily basis that you're being passive aggressive. So what do we mean by that? What does passive aggressive mean? Well, it means expressing an aggressive or hostile sentiment, but doing it in a very subtle way. So what do I mean by that? In other words, hurting someone without making it obvious. I'm sure that you can all think of some examples of sarcastic comments are oftentimes the culprit of passive aggressive statements where we're making fun of someone in a joke, but yet there's truth behind what we're saying. You know, maybe with your spouse has asked you to do something and you say, "Yep, I'll do it," but then with your actions you show that you had no intention of doing it because it doesn't get done. You know, again, it might be it's kind of a criticism packaged in a somewhat nicer, more passive package. And I think that that's something that we see in every relationship, whether it's an employee or an employer, whether it's with your kids, you see passive aggressive things. But this kind of communication tactic is just so unhealthy and really causes a lot of problems, especially in marriage, because again, we know each other so well, don't we? We know our hot button issues. We know the things that we're insecure about. And so oftentimes when we're really angry about something with our spouse, instead of just coming out and saying it, we package it in this message and we put it in sarcasm or in something that seems a little less direct, but it's really, really you want to zing them. Really what you're meaning and wanting to do is to hurt them. So what's the problem with being passive aggressive, especially in marriage? Well, first of all, it's very indirect, meaning it's not being direct. It's not being clear in your communication. It's not being honest. It's not saying, you know what, that really ticked me off when you did that, and just saying that statement. Instead, you might make a joke or an offhand comment that's sarcastic, that you're sending a message, but instead of being direct and honest about it, you're being indirect and actually hurtful. What's another problem? It's manipulative. It's not genuine. You know, again, in marriage, it's so important that we are honest and genuine, that we're truthful, that we want to love our spouse and show love by the things that we say and the things that we do. And being passive aggressive is not genuine. It's not being truthful about how you feel. And it's manipulative because you're making that statement confusing for your spouse by laughingly saying a comment, but yet it had a zinger. And it leaves the spouse feeling like, ouch, that hurt. Like you said that as a joke. And maybe you said, haha, I was just trying to be funny, but you weren't really trying to be funny, right? In the end, you really were trying to be hurtful. And for the spouse, the receiving party of that, it's actually even a little bit more crushing because it wasn't honest or genuine. And so now you're making a joke about something that's serious. So that's not good. And it also, at the end of the day, really creates an environment of distrust. I mean, if you're in a relationship with your spouse and you don't feel like they're honest or genuine in their communication, then how can you build trust? How can you build on that to really want to knit your hearts together and to feel safe about connecting and being truthful about your feelings if it's always going to be about sarcastic, biting comments that are passively aggressive? So you might be saying, yep, we're guilty of that. We've done that many times. What is the solution to that? Well, I want to bring us back to Ephesians chapter 4, first in verse 25. It says, "Therefore, having put away all falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another." In another translation, it's just putting off anything untruthful. So we are supposed to speak the truth. That is part of our role in loving people the way Jesus wants us to love. So first of all, passive aggressiveness, because it isn't coming from a place of truth, shouldn't be a part of our equation. Dropping down to verse 29, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Again, in another translation, it says, only what's to the benefit of the person listening to build them up. So we have to recognize that being passive aggressive then does none of that. It's not truthful, and it's certainly not for their benefit. It's certainly not for building them up when we're actually trying to tear them down. So first thing in avoiding this from happening in marriage is choose your words wisely. Pay attention to what comes out of your mouth. Be truthful. Be genuine. And lastly, say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't go to these tactics that might seem, well, maybe isn't that a nicer way? Trying to communicate something I'm mad about is to make it a joke. No, because at the end of the day, the intention is the same. That even though you might be packaging it in a less confrontational way, the message is still the same. And it's hurtful when it comes in a package that's not genuine. And so pay attention to this in your marriage. Here's a few questions I want you to think about. Rate yourselves on a passive aggression scale on 1 to 10. And then ask your spouse to give you a rating. And then talk about how you guys can start avoiding that from happening. What are the topics? What are the things in your marriage that brings out these passive aggressive statements? And really make a commitment to one another to say, let's be truthful. Let's mean what we say and say what we mean and not play these silly games. So take some time to talk about that today.